Start the recording here. Okay, wonderful. So our webinar today is on SharePoint project management, basically integrating project server with SharePoint. And our presenter is Dux Raymond-Sai. Extremely excited to have him as our presenter today, and I think you're going to love the actual presentation. It'll be a good interactive presentation. If you have questions, you can go ahead and throw the questions in the Q&A, and I'll try to tackle some. Dux will try to tackle some at the end as well. By the way, I'm the host, and my name is Asif Rahmani. I am also the host and the principal contributor to SharePoint-videos.com. That's the site that you're looking at right now. Let me go ahead and just quickly introduce SharePoint-videos.com. Just take a couple of minutes to do that, and then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dux. Okay, so here it is. SharePoint-videos.com. The reason this site exists, the main reason that this came into being is because of people like you, honestly. Is because people kept asking for so many years to myself, the other instructors who I contribute with, you know what, show me how to do some of this stuff. Just show me how to do this particular task. For example, making workflows, using InfoPath, using Excel services. How do you make something a trusted location? Many different kind of topics within SharePoint. So back in the early SharePoint 2007 days, we started making videos. And what that turned into was eventually now a site called SharePoint-videos.com. And what we do is we provide end-user and administrator training at SharePoint-videos.com. We have licensing for individuals, also corporate licensing. It's extremely powerful solutions, but they're all no-code. No code at all. You can build some really powerful things these days, especially in 2010 now, without doing any code whatsoever. So all together we have, how many is that? 223 videos out there. And we're making new videos every month, lots of videos. If you have any questions about that, let us know. Who are we? Just let me go ahead and tell you about us as well. That the way I feel at least that we provide a good return on investment for you guys. Because we have been doing this stuff for many years now. We're SharePoint MVPs and Microsoft certified trainers, and we've had the opportunity to write and contribute to many book projects. There's some of the ones that you're seeing out there as well. And we're presenters at conferences. So I'm sure many of you, I see the names over here in the Q&A, in the audience list in my screen here. And I know many of you by name, which is awesome. If you do happen to see any of us, myself, Wendy, Russ, and other folks who are a part of SharePoint-videos.com, go ahead and come on and say hi. It's great to see everybody. Okay, so that's it for SharePoint-videos.com. I'm just going to go ahead and give this a break here and turn this over to Dux. And let me just say a couple of words about Dux Raymond-Sai. Project management within SharePoint is such a hot topic for so many people. Just knowing where to get started, first of all. And then once you get started, what do I use? Do I use the built-in features, the Gantt chart, stuff like that SharePoint provides me? Or do I do Project Server and integrate that with SharePoint? First of all. And then if I do that, how much functionality do I get with 2010? What is new in 2010? There's so many things I get. And Dux is truly the expert in these topics. I mean, he's written a book on it in 2007, and I guess Dux can tell us if he's planning to write one in 2010 as well. But that's the kind of stuff that we all want to know about. I want to know about as well. So it's going to be great to see it. All right, that's enough. Let me go ahead and change the presenter to Dux here. All right, Dux, your show.
All right, well, thank you, Asif. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Before we begin, I just want to clarify one thing and one point. The presentation this afternoon will talk about how you leverage, out-of-the-box, Project 2010 with SharePoint 2010. We're not going to look at Project Server, though I can certainly do that on a separate presentation, Asif, but I'll be happy to address any questions you might have afterwards around Project Server. But since we only have an hour, I wanted to make sure I allocate the right time just to show you out of the box desktop Project 2010 what you could do with out of the box SharePoint 2010. Okay, so with that being said, one of the key points that Asif raised is around project management in SharePoint. And indeed, I wrote a book, SharePoint for Project Management, and yes, I'm working on a 2010 version, so watch out for that. But one of the key areas that I find a lot is once SharePoint is deployed in an organization, the main group of people that would be leveraging, at least initially, are project managers. And I hear this all the time. where I'd be talking to a project manager or a project team and said, hey, Docs, IT just gave us this thing called SharePoint because we asked them for a website to collaborate on our project. They gave us this thing called SharePoint. You know, there's so much you could do, but we'd like to know at the end of the day, how can we leverage this for what we do as project managers? Hence, that's how I begin focusing my work. I do a lot of PM work. I do a lot of SharePoint work. At least 3-4 years ago, where I really focus in this area where I think is very, very important for a lot of people. So in this session, what are we going to do? We're going to talk about, first of all, this whole idea of where Microsoft Project fits in this world of project management, and then where SharePoint fits. But more importantly, I'll show you, I'll do a lot of great demos on how you can leverage these two tools out of the box, no third-party stuff, no coding stuff, as you go through a typical project lifecycle. And what I mean by project lifecycle, okay, how do you use SharePoint when you plan a project or when you initiate a project? What about when you're running a project? How can you capture people's updates? So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about how you have your project team effectively collaborate. And when I say effectively, just leverage out-of-the-box SharePoint capabilities. If I were to ask you, and if you were to be honest with me, how do you collaborate in your projects today? I'm sure some of you will say, yeah, we use SharePoint, but I think most of you will say is we use email. I mean, shame on us. We live in the 21st century where everybody has an iPhone 4. You just bought a Kinect, and if I ask you, how do you collaborate in your projects? We're using the 1972 technology, email. What are you talking about, Ducks? Email? Yeah. I mean, think about it. When your boss asks you, where's that status report? Let me check my email. When's our meeting going to be scheduled? Let me check my email and see what the customer says. I mean, it's cool, it works, but it's not the most effective way. So I'll show you other ways of collaboration within a project environment using SharePoint. And then last but not the least, we'll talk about how you build a PM or a project management dashboard in SharePoint. I mean, that's a little secret I share with everybody. If you want to get promoted at work, use the word dashboard. Yeah, try it. You go to work tomorrow, tell your boss, I can build your dashboard. You get promoted for sure. Kidding aside, I'll show you how you can do this in 2010. So this is me. I'm with an organization called Innovative E. We're based out of DC and Atlanta, and we also have presence in Asia, in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Wrote the book, SharePoint for Project Management. And in fact, once we're done, I'll raffle off a copy. And Asif, think about how we're going to do this. But I'll raffle off a signed copy of my book, and we'll definitely send it to one of the participants in this session. There's my contact info. Feel free to connect with me. And at the bottom, that's my Twitter handle, and that's the Twitter hashtag for this presentation. Now, if you don't have a clue what I just said about Twitter, we'll make sure we'll have another session on Twitter, okay? So, with that being said, let's get started here. Before I jump on talking about how these technologies help us and work in the world of project management, let me first talk about the whole idea of leveraging tools for project management. And just to put things in perspective, Asif, if you look at this picture, does this look familiar? I mean, if you look at the top left, this is a typical project picture, by the way. You know, this is how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, right? How the programmer wrote it, what the consultant described, you know, with lights in the back, angels singing, how it was documented, what operations installed, how the customer was built, how about that, how it was supported, and what the customer really needed.
Nice.
Does
Very
this look
nice.
familiar to you?
To me, absolutely. This is it's an unfortunate reality, right? It's
Yes.
unfortunate reality. It's so true.
We find humor in this, but why do you think this happens, Asif?
Well, communication, right, is what we are told.
Absolutely, and to hone in on what you just pointed out, I think relevant communications. I mean, there's two ends of the spectrum, right? Lack of communications where you don't know about anything, and then you'll hear 3 months later, nothing's working. Or you get copied on every single freaking email that has nothing to do with you. And then what happens after a couple of emails, you know what, make it go to junk email or spam folder, and then when the real information that's for you comes through, you don't get it, right? So that's one, relevant communication. And one of the key culprits also I find, and I experience in a lot of project environments, is the lack of, you might sound crazy, but lack of standardized process on how you run projects, as simple as that. And when I say lack of standardized process, I'm not being preachy and academic here. Oh, you got to be CMMI or ITIL. No, it could be a 10-step process on how you manage or run projects. It could be as simple as, okay, during project initiation, this is step 1, this is step 2. A lot of organizations lack that. And to compensate for that, a lot of organizations misguidedly think that, you know what, our project management's not doing well, let's get a tool to help us, right? So a lot of organizations, and I've seen a lot from small organizations to large organizations where, you know, the knee-jerk reaction, if they think their project management environment or process or world doesn't work, let's buy a tool. Oh, let's get Project Server, let's get SharePoint, let's get these third-party stuff, let's get Primavera. And the sad reality is these tools won't run your projects. It's a false hope. They are tools. Before having these fancy tools or not fancy tools, whatever, you got to have your relevant processes in place and the right people to be involved in the project. I mean, it sounds so fundamental, sounds so basic, but that is the culprit why a lot of projects fail today. And don't get me wrong, I've heard a lot of times where people tell me, oh, Docs, Microsoft project sucks or SharePoint sucks, you know, we don't know what to do with it. Well, I turn back and say, no, you suck. Because the problem there is, again, these are tools. Realize that project and SharePoint are tools. You got to have your processes, and the relevant steps prior to using those tools should be in place. Now, with that being said, I just want to share this one picture, and then I'll be done talking about process and people. A lot of times, do you see my mouse moving, Asif? Okay. You should.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
So a lot of times, folks are in this bucket. This is a simplified view of what I call a project management maturity diagram, right? A lot of us are here where, you know, especially in the IT environment, you run this project. You know, now you're the de facto PM for rolling out SharePoint or whatever, or building this app. You know, that person doesn't necessarily have a PM background. There's really no process. I mean, we just do it, right? IT people, planning, that's for sissies. Real men, we just do it. Fine. And what do we do, or what do we use to run the project? Well, paper, Microsoft Word, Excel, email. And, you know, it works. It's not the best, but it works. And then now, as management decides, you know what, we got to make this better, you know, the knee-jerk reaction is always to jump from a tools perspective. Oh, let's get the most powerful tool out there. You know, since we're a Microsoft shop, let's roll out Project Server. Well, that's fine, but from level 1 maturity in the tools jumping to 3, that's already a problem. But also, the people and the process part is not moving along, meaning they don't account for this. So a lot of times the people in the process still in this level 1 maturity, and they drop a fancy tool like Lamborghini Diablo to somebody who's still learning how to ride a bike. It ain't gonna work. And I'm sure a lot of you are nodding your heads right now, because think about it. I'm sure some of you have Project Server in your environment and people hate it, don't care for it. Of course they will. They'll hate it, because if they're right here and you made them jump to use this tool, it ain't gonna work. So all of them should, in a real, practical, successful way, if you want to make it work, your project management maturity or your model successful, all these 3 things should come together. Now, why am I here? How does my presentation relate to this? That's where the beauty of Project 2010 and SharePoint 2010 comes in, because we can take that baby step. We can take from this level 1 maturity and all together work towards level 2, including the tool set. And Project 2010 and SharePoint 2010 is a good baby step versus just from this set of tools dumping them into a very sophisticated high-end tool. Now, let's talk about these tools. So what is Project 2010? Project 2010, personally, I feel like is a misunderstood product. A lot of people look at Project 2010 and use Project 2010 as nothing more than a glorified Excel spreadsheet. It's not that, friend. Project 2010 is a tool that supports pretty much 3 primary project management activities: scheduling, resource management, and reporting. And around scheduling, it helps support planning for a schedule and tracking a schedule. So let me talk about this 1 second. A lot of organizations I interact with, I engage with, when they use Project, they're really not using it to its full potential. How many of you in this session, think about this, are in an environment where you fire up Microsoft Project, you create a nice schedule, the nice Gantt chart, you make a printout, everybody has a copy, it's posted on the wall, and that's the end of it. When you run the project, nobody's really using it to track your baseline against your actuals. If you're not doing that, don't even use this tool. Just go and use Excel, okay? It assumes that you're familiar with a project management process or some kind of process you already have. A common complaint I hear from people is, hey, Doc's project, I don't even know where to start. I fired up. I mean, it looks familiar. There's a spreadsheet. There's a little calendar there. Okay, what's step 1? What's step 2? Well, it's a tool. It assumes you have your PM steps in place before you use this tool. And later on, I'll show you some resources and how you can get started on that. So that's what project is. In SharePoint 2010, hopefully I don't have to go into detailed explanation, but for those not familiar, SharePoint 2010 is the business collaboration platform for the enterprise and the web. SharePoint 2010 is a platform. It's not a specific product. You think about SharePoint, think about it clay or water. It's anything, nothing, and everything. You have to shape it to deliver a specific solution in your world. So in this presentation, I'm talking about SharePoint 2010 as a project management solution. It's going to provide a lot of collaborative solutions for project management teams to do project artifact centralization, streamline communication, generate dashboards, reports, and more importantly, interact with other tools that we're familiar with. Project, Word, Excel, and even email. In the project management world, there's this whole concept of a PMIS, and this is a standard concept. It stands for Project Management Information System. The idea of a PMIS, it's a standardized set of automated PM tools and integrated into a single system. So let's stop and think about this definition. Today, you know what our PMIS is, most of us? Is email. Think about it. Email is the glue that binds everything in a project. I know you got reports, you got requirements document, you got spreadsheets, you got budgets, you got project schedules. But what's the tie that binds everything together? From a project manager perspective, I would say a lot of you would agree, it's email. It works, but it's not as efficient. So the idea of a PMIS is something that's automated, that's going to tie everything in a project so that you don't have to worry about losing stuff or miscommunicating stuff. And that's where SharePoint comes in brilliantly, because it can be the PMIS for your project that supports most, if not all, of the activities within your project environment. So with that being said, so we talked about this whole idea of project management maturity, why tools is not just the only thing that you should consider in your project management practice. We talked about what project is, SharePoint is, and PMIS. Let's get started. I'm going to start showing you stuff on how you leverage these two things. So the way I'm going to cover it is going through the typical project lifecycle. So first I'm going to talk about project initiation or definition. So let's say you get assigned to work on a project, and what's the first thing you do, right? Well, let's say part of your process, so in my company, okay, when a project manager gets assigned a project, the first thing you do, one of the first things you do, is to create or define a PMIS for that project. Okay, so how do we do that? So for example, all right, in my world...
Hey Doc, can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah, go for it.
I've been seeing the Q&A, and a few people have said that your voice is coming a little bit lower from your microphone.
Oh, okay. Can you
just want to point that. I can hear you just fine, personally. I got it cranked up here, so I can hear you just fine.
Okay, let me talk. Yeah, just let me know.
Yeah, if nothing can be done, that's fine. I mean, I can hear you just fine over here.
All right.
Just want to point that out.
I'll try and talk louder. Okay.
All right.
All right, so thank you. So, all right. So here's the deal. So let's say my company is called SharePoint Cafe, and what we do is we serve coffee around the world. And more to that is we have a bunch of coffee shops around the world. So I'm a PM, and I was assigned to open a coffee shop in, I don't know, in Fiji. Okay, Fiji. Tough assignment. So part of our project management process is, upon getting an assignment, the first thing we're going to do, is to create this PMIS. So what I'm looking at now, so let's say I walked into my work environment. I fire up my browser. First thing I see is our intranet. So as a project manager, I've been trained to leverage this platform and make it as a project management information system for my project, is to create a PMIS for this Fiji project. And as you can see, I'm doing all this in my Mac environment, and that's another beauty of SharePoint 2010. It's cross-browser compatible. Now it doesn't really matter what environment, what platform you're using. Okay, 1 second. Something's up here. You saw this earlier, right? No, let's try this. Okay, there you go. Let's try this again. Are you seeing this, Asif?
I'm seeing your screen. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So my screen is flashing left and right. Sorry about that. And I thought Macs were perfect.
iPhones are perfect.
What's that?
iPhones are perfect. I don't know about Macs.
Yeah, iPhones are perfect. So yeah, this is really weird. We were just playing with this earlier. Let's see. Let me try this. Give me 1 second here. I'll do this. All right. Well, that's doing that. Let me just go through a couple of things, so it'll refresh and we'll be good to go. So part of our process is when a project gets initiated or defined, we create a PMIS. And ideally, this PMIS is nothing but a SharePoint site, but more importantly, it's already predefined with all the necessary components. And in SharePoint, these components are known as lists or libraries. So the idea is you want to make the lives of your project managers or project team as easy as possible. So you want to pre-populate templates, dates, anything that's relevant for this specific project. And we'll get to see that once we flip the screen up. And after our project definition, so let's say I've got this project management site up now. When we get started with planning, ideally, you go and do your planning activities in your project environment. So you build your WBS, and this is a picture of a WBS, work breakdown structure, where let's say if your project is to build a house, you talk about, okay, what deliverables do we need to produce? If you want to learn more about this, I've got a little URL that explains this whole concept of building a work breakdown structure. And once you build your WBS, you can create your Microsoft project plan. Now, realistically, if you're working on a project that you've done a gazillion times or your organization has, most likely your Microsoft project plan will be templatized as well. And you'll get to see this. I'll show you this. And there are a lot of different steps that you can take. And certainly, we don't have enough time to talk about everything. I have a 2-hour webcast, if you want to look at it, that I step you through how you create a Microsoft project plan, how you make it a template, all that good stuff. So you build your PMIS, you go and plan all the activities that you need to do, you come back, populate Microsoft project, and build your schedule. So my SharePoint environment should be up. Okay, let's try this again. All right. Okay. Now, while this is loading, one of the things I'd like for you to think about as you're considering Project 2010 and SharePoint 2010 is the demonstration I'm going to show today is leveraging Microsoft Project Professional 2010. And the reason why I specify that is one of the greatest and new features of Project 2010 out of the box is it has the ability to synchronize the schedule with a SharePoint task list, okay? And that's something brand new. And also, just to let you know, the SharePoint environment I have right now and the one I'm going to demonstrate for you is just using SharePoint Foundation. SharePoint Foundation is quote-unquote, I'm going to put the words quote-unquote free, because as long as you have a Windows Server 2008 environment, you can literally download SharePoint Foundation and install it. So from a demonstration purpose, what I'm really showing here is SharePoint Foundation and Microsoft Project Professional 2010 all out of the box, nothing third party, no connector, no custom code, and whatnot. Okay, so now, I didn't do anything different here. And let's see.
It looks to be, could just be a DNS issue too. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, we were playing with this earlier.
Right.
Yeah, that's weird. I didn't change anything. Let me try if this works out for us. So this was the one I was demonstrating. So let's let me make sure before I do anything drastic here. I rebooted this machine. Let me do oh, there you go. Okay, we should be good. So let's start with project definition. I'll talk about project planning. So let's say I'm a PM. I got assigned a new project. Part of our process is to create a project management information system. So I'm going to do that. I've been trained by IT, and IT has worked with the project management office to define what these project management sites would look like. So as I go through this list of templates, there it is, cafe project. By the way, what I'm showing you here is not out-of-the-box template that comes with SharePoint Foundation or SharePoint Server. It's something that IT and our project management office work together on. Yes, that's a great concept. IT working with the business, understanding what the business needs. Part of our process is defining, part of the governance IT put in place is we can't call these anything we want to. So part of the process is, okay, first letter of the location of the project and the first two letters of whatever that project is, FC. So now I'm going to go to more options, and only people in this project can be a part of this PMIS. We're not going to show any of these navigation, and let me hit create. So as this is happening, think about this. If you went back 15, 18 years ago, and you're a project manager, and you needed a website or a network share, we would have to create a ticket request to IT to get it done. And depending on how important you are or how important your project is, you might not get whatever you're asking for right away, right? And then there's this whole struggle now and battle with IT and the business. But think about what I've just done here. What I've just done, IT democratized or IT empowered me as a PM to be able to go ahead, serve myself, and build or generate this project management information system that I need. And again, as you saw, I didn't have to do any programming. It's all out of the box. And I just went through a wizard. And now I can define, who can come to this PMIS, because that would provide the necessary security and access restriction and whatnot. So not just anybody can come in. But I'm not going to define anybody. I'll just hit OK. So once that's done, voila, there it is. So if you look at this PMIS for the Fiji Cafe, folks, what you're looking at is SharePoint 2010. And to some of you, this might look familiar, but there's some tweaks that was done here. I mean, we have all these out-of-the-box components known as lists or libraries. So for example, PMO, the Project Management Office, and IT discuss and say, okay, we need an announcements section, a place where project team can do discussions. And also, let's go ahead and pre-populate all of our templates for this project into this document repository called the Shared Documents Document Library. This is really cool. Now as a PM, I'm empowered to move forward and create this repository for my project. Now even better, let me go ahead and go to the PMIS calendar and let me go ahead and define a specific event for our project. So let's say I already know when the kickoff meeting would be. So I'm going to say kickoff. All right. Location, conference room A. And, okay, so let's do the meeting. By the way, if you have, here's a tip. If you can control your meetings, I suggest you do your meetings in the afternoon. Now, if you're wondering why, you get to be more productive. Because if you do your meetings in the morning, people talk about Lost 24, Dancing with the Stars. You can't get the stuff done. If you do it in the afternoon, stuff will get done. So anyway, so now the idea is I'm able to enter this project event into my project calendar. Now here's something better. I know some of you are thinking, well, hope-de-doo, that's bless your heart. You're trying hard up there, but what you're showing me is nothing but a website. I mean, all this stuff I can do it in other technologies. I could use open source technologies for that matter. Yeah, I agree, but here's something special. Listen, watch this. So on this project calendar, I'm going to say connect to Outlook. I said connect, not connect. I know connect is a cool toy, but so what I just did is I took that project calendar information and now made it available in my copy of Outlook. By the way, this is not a 2010 new feature. It's been around since 2003, SharePoint and Office. But what I just did is I made the project calendar available in my copy of Microsoft Project. And now the idea is anytime that project calendar is populated, boom, I'll see it in my copy of Microsoft Outlook. That's great. I mean, think about it. How many of you use Outlook as your command center where you go to work every morning, you fire up Outlook, and you look at stuff in Outlook? What we're seeing here is this means as long as you've connected the project calendar to Outlook, anytime a new meeting entry has been put in that project calendar, you'll see it. And that's not all. From within Outlook, let's say I decide to schedule another meeting. So let's say requirements gathering, okay? We'll do it on that day. It's an all-day event. Call. Check this out. I've entered the data or the meeting requirements gathering in my copy of Outlook. If I hit refresh, boom, it shows up on the project site. Some of you, this might not be anything spectacular, but think about this. How many times in a project environment do we spend entering the same set of data in 10,000 different places? Oh, I got to put this here on this website. I got to put it in Excel. I got to put it in Outlook. Well, in this scenario, it doesn't matter where you enter the data or look at the data. SharePoint stores everything, but now I have a lot of different ways to look at it. And also, by the way, I don't know about you, but if you tied your Outlook information to your BlackBerry or mobile device, certainly the information will go through it as well. Very powerful. So that's the idea of project initiation. As a part of your process, you spawn off your PMIS. Next, so let's talk about project planning. So one of the things I discuss is part of planning is defining what to do in the project to generate the schedule. So if I go to the document library, again, I'm in the Fiji project. If you look at the shared documents document library, notice one of the things we see here is a Microsoft project file called Coffee Project. Let me go ahead and open it. Because the good people of IT and the project management office pre-populated with all the template I need, and as I open it, voila, look at that. For this type of project, all the necessary tasks has been defined, the estimates has been defined, and as a part of my project management process, by the way, this is the new Project 2010. It looks totally different than the prior version of Project. It has now the ribbon interface, which I really like, and it has a couple new features, which I'll talk about. But as a part of the process, so as I open this template, one of the first things I should do is update the project schedule. So for this project, opening the coffee shop in Fiji, I know we're going to start doing work on this on January 4th, 2011. Okay? So as soon as I do that, I'm going to hit OK. Notice that it did not change yet for the schedule. It's because in Project 2010, there is a new feature that wasn't in the previous version of Project. It's called this manual schedule. By default, in Project 2010, it doesn't automatically schedule your tasks. By default, it just picks manually schedule, which I think is a good thing. You could do it at a whole project level or independent task level. So when I hit auto schedule, what it's going to do now, it's going to take my information. I said the project will start on January 4th, based on the task and dependencies, it's going to schedule appropriately. It's going to say, okay, based on these tasks and estimates, your project will end on October 13th. Cool. So the task has been defined, dependencies established. My next step is to staff my project with the appropriate resources. So I'm going to go to the resource sheet. I'm going to put me, Ducks, and I'm sure if you're like my organization, you only have one resource for your whole project, right? So I'm going to assign Ducks to do all of this stuff, all right? So I'm going to go to Resource, Assign Resources, Assign Ducks. All right. Now, one of the things you'll see here is after I've assigned Ducks, notice the assignments are here, suddenly we see these red stuff pop up. What that means is, hold on, you've assigned more work to Ducks than he can handle. That's what we mean by that red marker. It's called resource overallocation. And the beauty with, again, Project 2010 is I can go to a graph called the resource graph, and it's going to show me when Ducks is overallocated. I just click on next overall. It says, look, man, based on your schedule, Ducks is working twice than what he's supposed to do. So this is 16 hours here on this day. In fact, here, Ducks is going to work 24 hours. What's the big deal, Ducks? You're being a sissy.
You can do it.
I mean, what's that?
I think you can do it.
What about this, man?
I'll help you.
30. There you go. So, but it's a nice little view as you plan and understand how your resources are being allocated. So, all right. So let me go ahead and save this, and keep in mind when I hit save, it's saving it back to this PMIS, which is cool. So I don't have to deal with emailing this all over the place. I don't have to deal with storing it in another repository and whatnot. So that's the whole idea. So we've got this PMIS that we can use to store artifacts, and we've got Microsoft Project to help us with scheduling. Cool. Now, going back to our presentation, all right, so I've just done that. What about project collaboration? So Asif, if I ask you, I mean, I'm sure you're working on a ton of projects right now. What are some of the typical collaborative activities do you engage your team members in?
Collaborative activity.
You do? Yeah, like in a project, what are the stuff that you do requires more than that you work with other folks on?
You mean the communication of it, or the actual activities?
I mean, anything specific, like activities, like you know, for me, for example, like when
Right.
I develop requirements, I work with my tech team, my BA, you know, so requirements gathering, for example.
Yeah, that's a big thing, you know, where there are things, of course, that I am not an expert on. There's many things like that. For example, the governance part of it. You know, there are folks who do awesome job at that. There are folks who do awesome job at web design templating using Photoshop or using Expression Designer for Microsoft. Those kind of things are activities that I don't do, of course, and I have to manage that, make sure the other person does it, right?
And that's a great point. And how do we, again, you know, I'm guilty of this too, but a lot of times we resort to using email, right? When we talk with the designer,
Of course.
the customer, stuff gets emailed all over the place. Not only the actual artifact, but even simple questions like, hey, Asif, what color did the customer wanted, whatever? I mean, we do it with email. It's fine, but it's not as effective. So
True.
Here's something what I propose. I mean, if you're doing any collaborative work, for example, in lieu of email, what about use a discussion board? And I'll explain why, right? So, for example, I have a question. When is testing? Okay. So for this project, Fiji Cafe, I said, when is testing? So what I'm proposing here is you create a standard, a process, a rule for your project team and say, okay, for this project, whenever you have a question about the project, don't email. Go to the project site, establish a new discussion. And, you know, I tell this to my team, I tell this to my customer, but realistically, this is what's going to happen. Even if I describe this, my customer would still email me stuff. Right? I mean, the irony is we're rolling out SharePoint for them. They still email me, and I told I'm trying to teach them to use SharePoint. You know, it is what it is. We're a creature of habits. So at least, you know, as a baby step, here's what you can do. And this works for me a lot. You know, I show people, look, okay, we're going to communicate. If it's about the project, let's talk about it in the discussion board. But if you're so used to email, tell you what, connect the discussion board to your copy of Outlook. Okay, this by the way only works in Outlook. And voila, look, the discussion kind of sort of shows up like an email. So you don't have to leave the comforts of Outlook. You can still get to your email, your calendars, and whatnot. But if anybody had a question, they post it on discussion board, and it's going to show up in Outlook. And then I can respond to this. Oops. I can say post reply, testing is next week. All right, post. And voila, same thing with the calendar. If I hit refresh, boom. Testing is next week. So people don't really have to go to this website. They can still work in Outlook as if they're emailing, but they're really not emailing. So you just have to teach them connect the discussion board to Outlook. But,
You know, Doug, I was going let me just throw something in there to validate what you're saying over here. This is such an awesome functionality. And by the way, I'm trying to speak low because I've been told that I'm speaking too loud. So anyway, this functionality, the way you demonstrated, is so awesome because you can actually, of course, all the threads, everything is stored in SharePoint Server first of all, so it's indexed. All the information is indexed. It's easily searchable. It's archived over time. So you get Outlook, and on top of that, you get everything in SharePoint, which is great.
And I want to hit on that, Asif, because I don't know about you, but I'm in DC. In some of my projects, I have to comply with certain regulations.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these regulations require, keeping information for so long. So what if 5 years from now you got audited? I mean, Sarbanes-Oxley, for example. Sarbanes-Oxley regulation, you got to keep financially related data for 7 years. Let's say this is a financial project, and you got audited 5 years from now, and you got question, who said this, who asked this, who changed this? Wouldn't it be so awesome if you can go to your archive project site and just run a search? And not only will it search that communication thread, but your documents, your meetings, everything, versus digging in through email looking for it. Or even worse, calling up IT. Hey, can you pull the backup up IT? We need to look for it. And that's like the call you don't want to make, because if you say the wrong thing to IT, what would IT say? No access for you. Next. But it's so simple, yet it's so powerful in terms of project communications and being able to capture it. Another idea around collaboration, I'm going to fire up Excel here. I mean, email is the #1 tool used in project management today. That's just a given. The second tool is Excel, okay? So let me show you another scenario. I was working with a customer, and one of their pain points, especially the accounting people, is every month they have hundreds and hundreds of projects. Every month this accounting person gets an email spreadsheet of all the project expenses. So imagine this lady is getting 100 Excel sheets every month, right? And her job is to consolidate all these expenses and create a report for management. So as I was working in this organization, by the way, this lady, she doesn't care for using a new tool. She loves Excel, right? So I took a different tack. I said, okay, what if, and by the way, she spends 2 days collating all this data and making it into a report. I go, what if I can reduce those 2 days? You're not going to do anything new or anything special. Would you want that? She goes, of course. So here's what I proposed. I said, okay, since we just rolled out SharePoint for you, and every project has a project site, what we're going to do is we're going to have the project managers enter their expenses in the project site, not in Excel. They're not going to email you Excel. And once they enter their expenses, it's just going to show up in your copy of Excel. You don't even have to go anywhere. It'll just show up here, right? And she goes, okay, that'd be great. So I showed her. So for example, this is the Fiji Cafe, right? And for example, this is, I'm just going to do a quick example here. Items, cost. So let's say we bought tables, and these tables cost $400. We bought some chairs for the coffee shop, all right? These cost $2,000. And in fact, let me go and change the column. Let me change the column to the right type, currency. Okay, all right, so good. And then what I did, and I showed it to her, I go, look, you can take this. By the way, what I'm showing here is nothing new in 2010. You could do this back in 2003 in SharePoint and Excel. Convert it to an Excel table, and I'm going to sync it with this project site. This is all out of the box, friends. I didn't do anything special here. SharePoint Cafe, Fiji Cafe, okay? And let's call this expenses. So what Excel is doing here is it's taking this information, contacting that project site, creating this expense list. Right? So now I'm in the Fiji Cafe expenses. Voila, there it is. So now the new process is, instead of project managers emailing this Excel sheet every month, they just come here and as a part of their project, you know, they can say, okay, we bought coffee beans, all right, for $1,000. We bought a lot. You know, we bought a car for this project for $20,000, whatever. Okay, and now the financial person just sitting on her desktop, she doesn't have to be in the same environment as the PM. She could be somewhere else, and this Excel file sitting on her machine, she could just say, okay, let me pull in everything that was entered there. Boom, voila, coffee beans, car. And she could do it for all the other projects. So this is a simple solution I proposed to her, and what she did, so I helped her tie all these sheets to the 99 other projects, and then she created another tab for like a summary. So she had like a summary sheet where it pulled in all the data from all these sheets with pivot tables and charts, and now the data is being fed in from the project site. That was a pain point solved. And a few months later, she calls me back. She goes, Docs, you know, thank you. This was awesome. I mean, instead of 2 days, now I spend a day just validating the data if it was good or not, because sometimes there might be typos. But the point being is, you think about project collaboration, there's a lot of different facets of collaboration. And this is collaboration, dealing with financial information. And we solved all this with out-of-the-box capabilities. So there's a lot of these things, if you start thinking about, other than email, that you can leverage out of the box. Now, so we looked at all this stuff, you know, how you can integrate it. Now, what about actual project tracking? So we've talked about project initiation and planning and how we can improve collaboration. There are a lot of things we track as soon as the project begins. Primarily, we track schedule. We want to know, are we ahead, are we behind? What about our budget? I kind of show that to you with Excel. We also track change, right? We don't want new scope coming in just because the customer wants it. We have to understand what that means and what's impacted the project. Project tracking entails 3 things. You watch what's happening, monitoring, you analyze it, and then you correct it. Having a tool like Project working with SharePoint is going to be great for you when you do project tracking. Because with Project 2010, you can now, out of the box, take the schedule we developed and make it synchronized with a SharePoint project task list, just like what I did with Excel. You know how I made the data in Excel show up in SharePoint and vice versa? You can now do that in Project 2010 out of the box. This feature was never there before. You had to buy third-party products to do it or even use Project Server. Right now, I'm not even using Project Server. What does this mean, though? This means that your project resources can enter their updates in SharePoint. So as a PM, I publish this schedule, and nobody else has to have Microsoft Project. My resource can go to this project site and say, okay, I'm 50%, or I need more time, or I'm behind. That information will be fed back to Microsoft Project, and project managers can review it. And more importantly, we can also expose custom field information in Microsoft Project. So let's do that. Okay. So let's say the project started, and right before it starts, me as a project manager, I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I will be baselining this project schedule, and the idea of baselining is freezing it, saving a good copy of it, so once we start running the project, I have a point of comparison, right? So as soon as I baseline the project, if we look at this, you would see 2 sets of bars. The red bar on the top is the actual. The bottom bar is what's called the baseline. That will never change. So I have a point of comparison. So I'm going to save this just to make sure. So now I'm going to publish it. As a PM, out of the box, this is called the backstage view in Office 2010. There's this feature now called Sync with Task List. Now before I do that, I want to go back to my project site and go to the project task list. The project task list has been revised in 2010. It's much better, much nicer. But notice in this Fiji Cafe, nothing's here, right? Nothing's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this project schedule. I'm going to say publish the schedule to the Fiji Cafe project, validate the URL. It saw that there's an existing project task list, and I can say sync. All right. Now, as it's syncing, one of the first things it'll say is, look, just to be safe, we're going to turn off automatic scheduling, because the last thing you want is when your resource updates information on the SharePoint project task, is suddenly the schedule would change. All right. So it's syncing, it's writing data, and once it's done, if I go back to my SharePoint project site and just hit refresh, notice now the information from Microsoft Project is published to the SharePoint project site. And just to show you something, this summary task called Project Initialization, if I expand it, look at all the subtasks, the way it's being displayed in Microsoft or in your SharePoint project task list is actually kind of like a subfolder, so I can dig in and go see all the subtasks. So what just happened here? Let's think about this. Let's stop for a while. The idea now is, as a PM, I can publish the schedule. It's going to be available on my project site. All the resources that are assigned to these tasks, and so happen it's me for all this, I could have hidden all the other stuff, would come here on a regular basis, once, twice a week, and put their updates here. How much have you done? Have you started? And again, it varies in organization how you measure these things. By default, it's going to measure % complete and task status. In my organization, I measure how much time have you actually spent and how much more time do you need. So it depends. And that's the beauty of Project 2010, because I can bring in other fields, right? So for example, I want to add the field called variance, duration variance. What duration variance is, it's going to measure the difference between what you planned for and what actually happened. So when I hit OK, duration variance, when I hit OK and sync, that field will be available. Okay, that field will be available. So after syncing it, let me go back, go to my project task list. Let me just update the view because I want to show you that. Okay, all right. Project task. One second, modify view. I want to show you that I can show the duration variance field that's coming from that came from Microsoft Project. So I don't really care about priority, task status. There's an attachment. Duration variance. You see that, friends? So that custom field in Microsoft Project showed up here, and when I click OK, boom, and the variance would show up. Right now, nothing. It's going to be 0 because I haven't started documenting what happened yet. So after I publish it and publish the necessary field, and I'm all good to go. So your resources would now come in. The beauty of this is your resources won't need Microsoft Project. All they have to do is, as a part of the process, they come in here and say, okay, I've started it, I've started the project. Okay, in fact, one of the things I failed to do is I wanted another field here. Let's add another field, actual finish, okay, because I want to show you the impact of this. Okay, all right, so let's sync this again. All right, keep project version, that's fine, because it saw I entered some data. And I want to, so what I did, just like that duration variance, I made that field called actual finish available in SharePoint as well. There you go, because I want my resource to put in when they've actually finished. So we can compare and contrast what happened versus what we planned. All right. So, all right, let's start over here. So let's say my resource starts entering data. Okay, we've started the project, which is cool. We've secured the site. I'm done with that. But the deal is, check this out, friends. I was supposed to finish it on February 23rd. That's the plan. But here's what happened. Here's what happened. Right here, I finished. I'm just going to be, exaggerating here. Not that I'm always slow. But I finished on March 8th. Everybody see that? Okay. So right now what it did is it took what the resource entered. Nothing changed, which is fine. So now the PM would come back and sync it. So it's going to take what's in SharePoint and bring it back to Microsoft Project. By the way, that sync button, I could have made it appear in this ribbon interface. I forgot to do that earlier. But here's what we've got, friends. Notice that we actually started the project. Okay, and securing site is complete. Notice there's a check, but here's the difference. We planned that it's going to be finished on February 23rd. But when it was actually finished, it was March 7th. You know, it is what it is. Now, as a project manager, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, all right, what's the impact to the rest of the project? I can highlight all this and say, reschedule this for me, will you? Boom. After I hit auto schedule, all right, see what happens here? Because this task took longer than it was supposed to, notice it showed the impact to the rest of the project. The black is not going to change. That's the baseline. The top part is what's actually happening. And it's going to say, okay, instead of finishing October 13th, now it looks like your project's going to finish on October 25. And certainly I can call my resource. I said, hey, Dux, what's up? Why were you behind? Well, bad weather, whatever. So it is what it is. So let's say if this is the case, if this is the new schedule, as a project manager, let me say this again, I can push this schedule back out. I'm going to hit sync. And once I hit sync, I'm going to refresh my task list. Okay, notice the original schedule was to finish on the 14th. I'm going to refresh this task list. Now it says the 26th. And this is great, right? So there's this whole process where you have to define the resource updates, whatever the task status is. PM reviews it, approves or rejects it, reschedules it, and republish it. So you continuously do this throughout the project lifecycle. And I think it's great because a lot of times this is, at least at the maturity level 1, going to level 2, this is some of the basic things project managers are looking for without any of the fancy, sophisticated tools. And that's the beauty, again, of Project 2010 and SharePoint together. Now, what else? Creating reports. One of the powerful things, I know we have a few minutes, but I'll show this to you, is the out-of-the-box capability of SharePoint 2010 to develop reports for us. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's say one of the things that management wants is, hey, we want a view or we want a dashboard to show all the expenses of the project. You know, if there's a bunch of numbers, it's too much. Okay, that's cool. So instead of, I don't know about you, I remember the days where every Thursday afternoon a customer calls me up and says, hey, can you create a report? And every Thursday afternoon I have to do it. So what I could do now is in SharePoint 2010, there's a new web part called the chart web part. There you go. And when I add that, it's a visually rich charting tool. And by the way, even if you have SharePoint Foundation, you get this, that you can embed onto your SharePoint site, and you can define all the necessary data sets you want to display. So first things first, so let's say I want to customize my chart. So let's say my customer, he wants like a, I don't know, a pie chart, for example. He wants to see a pie chart of the project expenses that's been incurred to date. Okay, that's cool. So I'm going to pick a 3D pie chart. Okay, cool beans. Thick donut. All right. So I've defined the type of chart. And when I say I've defined, I as a project manager, I'm doing all this without any advanced technical know-how. Obviously, I have to be trained on this, but again, it's all wizards based. So I'm going to say, okay, let's take, and by the way, I can tie any information I want, even the schedule. If I want to display the variance, I could do that to see if you're ahead or behind. But let me tie the expenses to this. Just show the data. Next. And certainly I can put filters too if I wanted to, or some advanced mathematical formulas. But for the purposes of this example or exercise, there you go. So there you go. Check this out. It took the expense information from my project and displayed it in a visual format. Well, hold on, Dux, 1 second though. That expense is tied to an Excel sheet, right? Yep. So is it possible that that financial person sitting elsewhere can update that Excel sheet and it's going to reflect on that chart? Absolutely. So let's say the financial person looks at this and say, hold on, you didn't buy a car. I'm reviewing your receipts here. You bought car bit. right? It's not 20,000, it's 2,000 bucks, all right? So the financial person can push this out, and once it's pushed out, obviously it's going to be pushed out to that expense list, carpet, 2,000 bucks, which is tied to that dashboard. By the way, you can put delays on that too. You can say only show after 30 minutes, whatever. Well, look at that. So now this dashboard is real time. You don't have to deal with creating all these nice PowerPoint pictures every week and send it to your customer. Just tell them, look, come to the site. You see all the expense information real time. And again, that's very powerful. One more capability out of the box you could do with SharePoint 2010 for project management is improve and automate your processes. So one of the key things in the project environment is this idea of changes. So what we have here is a change request form, and it's in the SharePoint speak, it's really a custom list with simple fields. But today, you know, how people do this is they just email, hey, can you change that? Can you not change that? It's not formalized and it's not captured. The idea here is not only can we capture it, that's one thing, but we can automate it. We can put rules as project managers to say, okay, if a change request was submitted, go ahead and contact the PM. Once the PM reviews it, it will be sent to the change control board. And once it gets approved, all this communication will happen. Now, that cycle of communication can be automated other than email, because you can tell the system to start alerting this person or start doing this or the other. But in addition, it's documented. So for example, I have this workflow, change request workflow, where I just use the out-of-the-box 3-state workflow, right? And define, and define how this workflow would behave. And once that happens is, every time a change request gets entered, it's going to do its thing. It's going to automatically email the PM. If the PM doesn't respond in 2-3 days, it's going to ping the PM again, hey, remember, do this. So there's more accountability and, more importantly, transparency, because all these things would be documented. I was explaining this to my customer. He was like, I don't think that's good, Doc. I go, why not? We're now more responsible, right? So again, it's not locked in email inboxes. It's now in this project management information system that's available to relevant people in the project. So with that being said, Asif, I hope you found that beneficial and helpful, and hopefully everybody else. I'd like to take the rest of the time and address any questions or comments you might have. And this is my contact info. If you have questions, drop me an email. Don't be a stranger. I respond to emails. In fact, I respond faster on Twitter. But also, if I can ask for a favor, if you can drop a quick feedback on this URL about this presentation, that would be great. Awesome.
This is awesome stuff, Dux. I personally enjoyed it quite a bit, and I'm pretty sure many people did as well. I'm looking at the Q&A that's been coming through. I've been answering some of the stuff and queuing some of the stuff for you, and there's definitely a lot of interest in this topic. You know, one thing that it comes in my mind also, something that's recently that's come to my mind, is how does Project 2010 and just project in general fit into the Office 365 thing that's coming out right now? Any thought about that?
Yeah, very good. In fact, I just spoke with Arpan Shah. Arpan Shah is the director, is the GM of the Microsoft Project Group. For those not familiar with him, he used to be with the SharePoint team. It's in the works. There's no specifics, but Project Client itself is not part of Office 365. You would still have to purchase. So when I describe Project Client, I'm talking about Microsoft Project on the desktop. As far as I know, it still has to be purchased separately. But there's movement and there's plans on taking Project Server to Office 365, which I didn't even discuss in this presentation. And certainly I'd be happy to do another presentation for you, Asif, just on Project Server alone.
Wonderful. Awesome. Yeah. If you're cool with it, what I'm going to do is just go through a few of the questions that have been coming in.
Yeah, definitely.
So starting from, giving priority to the people who asked first, there's one person who asked about, you had a presentation, the 2-hour presentation you said about making a project plan. This person is asking, Jennifer is asking actually, that is it going to be available, or is it already available on the web somewhere?
It's already available. I have the URL on my slides. When I'm done with this presentation, Asif, I'll send you the slides, and folks can access it. But there's a URL. It's already on the web.
Okay.
I did that actually for O'Reilly Media, and it's on their YouTube channel.
That's great. One question was, the SharePoint site that you're using, is there a specific template that you're using, or just a regular team site?
The the SharePoint side, very good question. This template that I'm using is actually, what we did is, when I say we, I'm playing the role of IT and PMO. We took the team side template and specified it for this specific project, opening a coffee shop. So we took out lists we didn't need. We put in all the, like these change requests. It's a custom list we developed. All the necessary templates for the project was pre-populated. And this is really in the idea of making the lives of our project managers easier. So when they come in, their training wasn't on SharePoint. Their training was on, okay, in our project management environment, when you get assigned a project, here's what you do. Here's the people you talk to. Here's the tool you use. So from a holistic view versus here's SharePoint, go prosper.
Wonderful. And to add to what Dusty is saying, if you want to enhance a site like this one and capture it for future usage, you can just make a site template. It's just a regular .wsp file, a solution file that you can use again and again.
And to add to that, no programming required. It's
that's right.
I'm sure Asif has videos on it. Literally, I mean, after we designed this, from a site level settings, you can just go here and say save site as a template.
Done. Exactly.
So the tool is not, again, forgive me if I sound like a nagging in-law, but the tool is the least of your concern. You got to get your process in place, and you got to get your people on the same page.
So true. It's an awesome platform, but you have to do the processes, you have to implement the processes properly for it to be successful. So true. Another question here, this is from Hussein. Can we associate team discussion to the project tasks?
Very good question. Can we associate discussion to the task? And the answer is yes. The beauty of this is, and that's why I love SharePoint, it's so flexible. I can create a column, for example. So I got the task list right here, and I can create a new related discussion, for example, right? I can create a new column, and it's a lookup type, and I can pick team discussion and just pick what? The title, what's this? Information, subject.
Subject, yeah.
There you go. Did I pick the right? Yeah, okay. So when I click OK, in theory, right? So when I click on a specific, let me change my view here. So when I click on a specific task, like securing site, and I hit edit, I can tap into the related discussion, like here when it's testing. Now, the only flip side is, let me make this disclaimer, this information will not go back to Microsoft Project, okay? This information will not go back to Microsoft Project, because if I try and sync it, it's going to say something here. Yeah, you can't, there are specific fields. Oh, well, it didn't, well, maybe I'm wrong. Hold on, because I've never really tried it. I've just assumed it. Yeah, it didn't show up. So that column called related discussion didn't come back.
Yeah, I don't think it would.
Related? Yeah, but you can't access it from Microsoft Project. But that's a good thought, good question, though.
Wonderful. Patricia here is asking, we have limited resources on multiple projects. Can the dashboard aggregate, can it aggregate their time, people's time, I guess, across projects to show workload or availability?
The answer is yes, but there's a couple of catches to it. First of all, the most effective way to do that is you start off in Microsoft Project and you create this thing called a resource pool. A resource pool is just a file with all the resources, and you can tie them to a bunch of projects. I know exactly what you're talking about. And then the catch is all these project sites should be in the same site collection, meaning you can have a site just on resources, and you can have all the projects tap into the resources on that one site. There's a little more jerry-rigging to do. There's nothing automated. To answer your question, is it easy to do it? Is there anything out of the box you can do? No, there's none. There's jerry-rigging. When I say jerry-rigging, not coding, but there's things that you got to bring up content query. You got to do lookups from one side to the other. You can do it. So if you have that need, what I suggest If you don't want to go that route, what I suggest is either you go project server or you go and get third-party tools, add-ons to SharePoint specific to project management, resource management.
Cool. Hey, someone's asking about your book, by the way. When is your next book out? Todd is asking. 2010.
Very good. I'm actually working on 3 right now.
Oh, wow.
The update, yeah, in my spare time, right? The update to my existing book should come out springtime. So I'm halfway there because there's a lot of different new features in 2010. So SharePoint 2010 for project management will come out spring or late spring. But I'm working on 2 other books too. So, but yeah, definitely, I'm working on books.
Yeah, so much work required in writing those things. So I don't know how you're doing all 3. That's great. Looking forward to it. Another question here by Eric. Does Project 2010 need SharePoint 2010 to sync tasks? And you know what? To add to that, what is the other compatibility? I mean, so does older projects, do they also sync up with SharePoint 2010 and vice versa?
Very good question. So let me answer that correctly. And Eric, feel free to chime in if I didn't answer your question. The task synchronization capability is a feature new in Project 2010. And you can only do that with a SharePoint 2010 site. So if you had Project 2010 on your desktop and you have MOS 2007 or WSS3, the syncing won't work. It's just not there. Now, what version of SharePoint 2010 do you have to have for the syncing to work? You can use SharePoint Foundation or obviously the SharePoint Server, Standard, or Enterprise. Can you take older project plans or Microsoft project schedules, load it up in Project 2010, and do the syncing with SharePoint 2010? Absolutely, you can. Now, what about that? If you have Project 2007, can you do the syncing stuff? No, not out of the box. You can get third party to do that.
Great. There's a question by Todd, another Todd here, about synchronization from the project from Excel that you were showing before. You know, if you were to not push the synchronization, whether you closed Excel, would it remind you to do the synchronization?
Say that again? Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Great question. So the way synchronization works in Excel, it doesn't remind you, but when you open it up, it'll automatically sync when you open it back up. But as long as you keep it open, it's not going to do auto synchronization. So going back to that question, if I close this, open it back up, yes, it will do a one-time sync. It's just by virtue of it opened up. But if I keep this open all the time, it's not going to do any syncing.
Great. You know, this chart part that you showed, which is, of course, awesome to be able to chart data from analysis services, from lists, from Excel spreadsheets, and all that stuff. Is that, this person's asking here, is that only a SharePoint Server Enterprise functionality?
No, you can get it in SharePoint Foundation, which I think is great.
Yeah.
In fact, this charting beats any of the other charting tools in the old version of SharePoint, even if you had MOS 2007 Enterprise, in terms of, you know, how nice it looks.
I agree. Such a powerful web part. Absolutely. What Bob is asking, what capabilities are available in SharePoint and Project 2010 for portfolio management?
None. There's no portfolio management capability. I mean, if you're at a level at that, if you're at a project management maturity at that level, so here's the deal, friends. I want to go back to my first slide, right? If you're at that level, then again, you got to reevaluate and revisit your maturity, because keep in mind what I'm showing here is just a baby step from level 1 to level 2. If you're talking about portfolio management, enterprise resource management, continuous improvement process, hooking up with other systems, you've outgrown what I just showed you, right? You want to go to, again, like tools like Project Server 2010 or other comparable tools. Now, not to say you can't jerry-rig it to do that. You can, but there's a lot of jerry-rigging to do.
I'll do a couple more over here, then we'll call it a day. I know Dusty must be tired now as well. We got one here asking about, is there a limitation of how big the project file itself could be that you can store and then work with in SharePoint?
Maybe you can help me with this, Asif. So in theory, there's none. And I believe in SharePoint 2010 for lists, is the 2,000 items still a
No. So, that never was. It's a huge myth, unfortunately. Now we have such awesome tools. So 2,000, and actually it was 3,000, it was never 2,000. 3,000 was kind of like a performance limit for a view, and that performance limit right now is 5,000. But in terms of the actual holding, the actual amount of things in a list, that's about 1 million. Now, this person is asking about specifically how big the project file itself could be within a document library, for example. And to my knowledge right now, 50 megabyte is still the default, and then you can rig it up to 2 gigabyte.
That's a great point. In theory, there's none. So how is, in my example, how does all this work? So in my example, the actual project file I'm looking at here is actually stored in the document library of the PMIS coffee project. So theoretically, anybody can come in and open it and look at it as long as they have Microsoft Project, which what I'm not proposing here. What I'm proposing is only the PM has Microsoft Project, and then publish the schedule to a project task list, in this case on the SharePoint site, right? So how big can the file be? In theory, unlimited, as long as you change the default limit in the document library. And then how big can this project task list be? In theory, there's no limit. And these tasks here lines up with a task in the Microsoft project file.
Awesome. Hey, one last question over here. In terms of resources for this project management and even project server that we have not discussed in this presentation, resources, what would you suggest in terms of documentation or videos out there or things like that? What is out there that would be good, beneficial for people to go to?
It depends. My answer, I know it's a political answer, it depends. When you say resources, right, what are you looking for? I mean, one of the areas, certainly I'll talk about my site, that's the key area I focus in, project management and how you leverage SharePoint to support your PM. So I have a lot of stuff around it. I have stuff on my blog, like videos on what's project planning, what are dependencies. I'm not even talking about SharePoint. So just the basics, right? Because, so that's one. Another area, another site you want to check out just on project management, a site called Gantt. By the way, I'll provide all this to Asif. He can post it on his site.
Absolutely.
There's another site called focus.com. It's a great site. It's not limited to project management, but it's really, it's like a Gartner-like site, but not like Gartner. It's not as academic. But there's a section on project management. So there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, the project team's website, the official blog of the project team. So, but I'll give you a list that where I recommend to people. I'll give it to Asif, so you can go to it.
And you know what I'm going to do with these resources and your information, Doug, and actually this webinar that we have recorded, we'll put everything up on SharePointVideos.com, and it's going to be available for free for anybody who's on call right now and who was able to make it. Everything's going to be available. It's always, I think, extremely enjoyable for, I'm sure for Doug as well, and for me and for other presenters to come out and interact with you guys. So if you're not able to answer some questions, Doug is available. Like he said, he's ready to take on questions, email. That'd be great to connect with him if you could. Meetdux.com will tell you everything that you need to know about Dux. There's a lot of stuff, like you said, and resources that you can get from there as well. And I just want to, formally thank you very much, Dux. This has been a huge pleasure for me, at least, to have you on board over here with SharePoint Videos. So thank you.
Hey, same here. And again, anytime, and Asif will schedule something on Project Server. But thanks, everybody, for joining. Hopefully you found this beneficial, and hit me up on Twitter, and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, and have a great rest of the day.
Take care.